Looking back now, the scariest part is not that Madison lied to me. It is that she lied so convincingly that I never questioned her. When you spend years loving someone, you stop examining every word they say. You trust them. You assume they would never intentionally hurt you. That trust becomes automatic, almost like breathing. Unfortunately, that same trust can blind you to things that would seem obvious to everyone else. At the beginning of that year, everything appeared normal. We were still spending most of our time together. Even though we had separate apartments, she practically lived at my place several nights a week. We cooked dinner together, watched movies on the couch, and talked about our future. We had even started discussing moving in together officially. There was only one problem. Boston was expensive. Every apartment we liked seemed to cost far more than either of us wanted to spend. After running the numbers repeatedly, we agreed it would be smarter to wait a little longer before signing a lease together. At the time, it felt like a minor inconvenience rather than a relationship issue. Neither of us seemed upset. There were no major arguments, no dramatic fights, no obvious warning signs. At least that is what I believed. Then August arrived. I had planned a trip to Maine to visit my family for a couple of weeks. Madison was supposed to join me after finishing some work commitments. We had talked about spending time by the lake, grilling outside, and catching up with relatives she had known for years. Everything was set. Then, a few days after I arrived, she called me unexpectedly. I could immediately hear stress in her voice. She told me her mother was seriously ill and that she needed to fly to South Carolina to help take care of her. Naturally, I understood. Family comes first. I told her not to worry about the trip and to focus on being there for her mom. She thanked me and promised we would make up for the lost time later. For the first week, communication remained fairly normal. We texted throughout the day. We talked on the phone at night. She sounded tired but believable. Then things gradually started changing. Her responses became shorter. Hours would pass before she replied. Phone calls became less frequent. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, she blamed exhaustion and family stress. Again, I believed her. Why would I not? This was someone I had loved for years. Then another unexpected problem appeared. One evening she called and told me she had contracted chickenpox. At first, I thought I had heard her wrong. Chickenpox. Most people get it as children. Apparently, she never had. According to her, she became infected while helping relatives and was now extremely sick. She described feeling miserable. She talked about fevers, rashes, exhaustion, and being unable to travel. She sounded convincing enough that I never questioned the story. Weeks turned into months. The strange thing was that despite supposedly being sick, she continued working remotely. Every explanation she offered seemed just reasonable enough to prevent me from becoming suspicious. Whenever I started wondering why she was still gone, she would provide another detail that made the situation sound believable. I wanted to trust her, so I did. By the time October arrived, I had not seen her in person for months. I missed her terribly. The distance was frustrating, but I kept reminding myself that life happens. People get sick, families have emergencies, relationships sometimes require patience. Then Halloween weekend finally arrived. Madison returned. The moment I saw her, all my frustrations disappeared. She looked beautiful. She smiled the same way she always had. The chemistry between us felt exactly the same. We spent the weekend together laughing, talking, and reconnecting. It felt like no time had passed. Honestly, I was just relieved to have her back. For those few days, everything felt normal again. Maybe even better than normal. I remember thinking that all the months of stress were finally behind us. I could not have been more wrong. After Halloween, she vanished again. Not physically at first, emotionally. Communication immediately became inconsistent. Text messages went unanswered for hours. Phone calls became rare. Plans were constantly postponed. Whenever I asked what was going on, she provided vague explanations. Work stress, family obligations, exhaustion. The excuses kept changing. The results never did. Weeks passed. My frustration grew. For the first time in years, something felt genuinely wrong. There was a distance between us that had never existed before. And unlike previous rough patches, I could not figure out why. Eventually, I reached my limit. One afternoon, I decided I was done waiting for answers. Since she lived only a short walk from my apartment, I figured I would simply go see her in person. I wanted a real conversation. No more vague texts. No more excuses. No more disappearing acts. I walked down the street toward her apartment building. The entire way there, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I was angry. I was confused. Mostly, I was hurt. When I arrived, I noticed something strange. Her name was no longer listed. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. I double-checked. Then I checked again. Nothing. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I knocked anyway. A neighbor eventually answered. What happened next completely blindsided me. The neighbor casually informed me that Madison had moved out. Moved out. The words hit me like a punch. I just stood there staring. She had moved, and somehow never told me. I immediately called her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Several hours later, she finally responded. When we eventually spoke, her explanation sounded ridiculous. According to Madison, her father had suddenly become ill. At the same time, her student loan payments had started. She claimed she could no longer afford living in Boston, so she decided to move back home to help care for her father while saving money. Then came the part that bothered me most. When I asked why she never told me, she said she had been embarrassed. Embarrassed. She claimed she was ashamed of her financial situation and worried I would judge her. The explanation felt strange, but not impossible. People do irrational things when they are stressed. I wanted to believe her, so once again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But something inside me had changed. A seed of doubt had finally been planted. Over the following weeks, every attempt I made to visit her was met with another excuse. One weekend her father was having a bad day. Another weekend she had work deadlines. Then her car supposedly broke down. Then she was helping family members. Then she was feeling sick again. There was always something. Always a reason. Always a barrier. The excuses became so frequent that even I could no longer ignore them. One night I sat alone in my apartment replaying everything that had happened over the previous few months. The sudden trip, the illness, the disappearance, the move, the excuses. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask a question I had avoided. What if she was lying? The thought made me physically uncomfortable. I did not want it to be true. But once the possibility entered my mind, I could not stop thinking about it. The next few days turned me into a detective. I started reviewing old messages, looking for inconsistencies, examining timelines, trying to make sense of everything. The more I looked, the less her story added up. Then another strange detail surfaced. Madison suddenly removed me from all social media. When I confronted her, she claimed she no longer used Facebook or Instagram. According to her, she had deleted everything. Again, the explanation sounded plausible. Lots of people quit social media. But by now, my trust was hanging by a thread. I could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Since she had blocked me, I asked a few mutual acquaintances to look her up, specifically people she did not know, people whose accounts would not raise suspicion. At first, I expected to find nothing. Maybe a few old photos, maybe proof that she had simply become more private. Instead, I uncovered something that completely changed my life. Something so shocking that I literally stared at my computer screen in disbelief. A discovery that instantly exposed every lie she had told. And in that moment, I realized the woman I loved had been living an entirely different life. A life she had hidden from me for months, maybe even years.